The chandeliers sparkled above like 1,000 frozen stars, but Leela Hayes felt completely invisible. She stood quietly in the farthest corner of the grand ballroom, clutching a silver tray to her chest, her plain black maid uniform making her blend into the marble walls. Billionaires, socialites, and the city's elite filled the hall, sipping champagne and gossiping under the glittering masks of wealth. For Leela, this was just another shift. Another night of picking up crystal glasses, dodging arrogant remarks, and serving people who didn't even look her in the eye. What she didn't know was that before the night ended, she'd become one of them. At the center of the ballroom stood Damien Knight, the man everyone whispered about. The youngest knight heir, self-made billionaire, ice in his veins, he stood like a king surveying his kingdom, his tailored black suit hugging his broad shoulders, his jaws sharp enough to cut glass. Women stared, men envied, but Damien didn't notice anyone. Not tonight, because tonight, he was about to commit the most scandalous act in the Knight family's history. Damien, listen to me, his mother hissed under her breath, her diamond necklace catching the light as she clutched his arm. You will marry Serena, and you will secure this merger. Enough of your games. His jaw clenched, gray eyes narrowing. Games? His voice was a low, dangerous growl. You've been controlling my life for 28 years, mother. Tonight, I play by my rules. Her face flushed with fury. Damien, don't you dare. He stepped away before she could finish, his expression cold, calculating. And then his gaze landed on her. Leela. She was arranging champagne flutes on the edge of the buffet table, her head bowed, loose strands of chestnut hair falling over her face. There was nothing remarkable about her clothes, nothing special about her shoes. But her eyes, when she finally glanced up, startled him. Big, soft, and the warmest shade of hazel he'd ever seen. Innocent, unaware, untouched by the poison of his world. A slow, dangerous idea bloomed in his mind. Minutes later, the ballroom fell silent as Damien strode to the center of the marble floor, his deep voice cutting through the music. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, drawing every gaze toward him, I have an announcement to make. His mother's face lit up in relief, assuming he was about to confirm the engagement they'd spent months arranging. But then Damien turned, extended a hand, and said words no one expected. Leela Hayes, he called, his voice steady, commanding, come here. Leela froze. Every eye in the room swung toward her, the invisible maid who'd never been noticed before. Her breath caught in her throat, the tray trembling in her hands. Emmy? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes. You. Damien's gaze locked on hers, sharp and unyielding. Come here. She wanted to run, to vanish, to hide behind the towering champagne tower. But her legs moved on their own, carrying her forward one shaky step at a time until she stood before him. Her heart pounded in her ears. Sir, I think you, marry me, Damien said. The room gasped collectively. For a moment, Leela thought she'd misheard. She blinked up at him, her voice shaking. I'm sorry. I said, he repeated, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet, marry me. Right now. The crowd erupted, gasps, whispers, frantic speculation. His mother's horrified scream cut through the noise. Damien, have you lost your mind? But Damien didn't even glance at her. His storm gray eyes stayed locked on Leela's stunned face. She shook her head, panicked. I don't understand. I'm just a maid, I can't. Exactly, Damien said, his lips curling into the faintest, coldest smirk. You're perfect. Within minutes, chaos unfolded. The paparazzi outside went wild. Guests whispered furiously. Serena, the heiress Damien was supposed to marry, stormed out in humiliation. And Leela stood frozen, trembling, her entire world spinning as the next thing she knew, she was in a chapel inside the Knight estate, Damien's iron grip on her hand as vows were exchanged in front of stunned witnesses. The ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. There were no flowers, no rings, no romance. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Damien leaned down, his breath brushing her ear as he whispered, "Welcome to hell, Mrs. Knight." That night, the headlines exploded. Ideographic period, billionaire Damien Knight marries his maid in shocking twist. Heiress left at the altar, Knight family in turmoil. Who is Leela Hayes? The mysterious bride no one saw coming. Leela stared at the news on her cracked phone screen, her hands trembling. She didn't understand what had just happened. She didn't understand why all she knew was that in one reckless night, she'd gone from invisible maid to the most talked about woman in the city. But if she thought the nightmare ended with the wedding, she was wrong. Because Damien Knight didn't marry her for love. He married her to destroy his family. And she had just stepped into a world of power, scandal, and secrets, completely unprepared for the storm that was coming. The following morning, Leela woke to the sound of soft jazz echoing faintly through the massive penthouse. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality slammed back into her chest, the marriage, the chaos, the endless flashing cameras outside Damien Knight's estate. She sat up on the edge of the enormous king-sized bed, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline. Everything was surreal. The velvet curtains, the marble floors, the chandelier glimmering like captured starlight. This wasn't her world. She didn't belong here. Before she could gather her thoughts, the door opened and Damien stepped inside, wearing a crisp black suit and an expression carved from stone. He didn't bother greeting her. Instead, he tossed a thick document onto the bed. "Sign it." Leela blinked, startled. What is this?" "Your marriage contract." His tone was cold, clinical, as though he were discussing a business merger instead of her life. She picked up the document, her hands trembling slightly. The papers were heavy, bound in leather, filled with pages of legal jargon she couldn't understand. "This," she swallowed, scanning the first page. "This says we're married in name only." "Yes," Damien said flatly, sliding his hands into his pockets. "This marriage is nothing but a transaction. You'll live here, attend events when I say so, smile when the cameras are on, and in 6 months, we'll quietly divorce. You'll leave with a generous settlement and your life back." Leela's chest tightened. "Then why me? You could have chosen anyone. Why humiliate me?" For the first time since entering the room, Damien looked directly at her, his grey eyes cold as steel. "Because choosing you," he said slowly, "was the fastest way to ruin my family's plans. You weren't part of their blueprint. You're not an heiress. You're not a pawn they can control. You are chaos." His words stung more than she wanted to admit. "So I'm just a weapon to you." His lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, more like a warning. "Exactly." Later that day, Leela followed Damien down a hallway lined with oil paintings and polished mirrors, feeling completely out of place. He led her into the Knight family's private dining room, where his mother, Eleanor Knight, sat at the head of a massive oak table surrounded by crystal chandeliers. The woman's icy gaze swept over Leela from head to toe like a laser, leaving her feeling naked and small. So, Eleanor said sharply, her voice smooth as glass and just as cold. This is the maid you married. Leela swallowed, lowering her gaze. Good afternoon, Mrs. Knight. Eleanor's lips curved into a cruel smile. Do you even know how to use the right fork, dear? Oh, wait. You probably clean them, not use them. The other relatives laughed softly, muffled behind manicured hands. Leela's cheeks burned hot with humiliation, her chest tightening, but she forced herself to stay silent. Before she could reply, Damien's voice cut sharply through the laughter. Enough. The room fell silent instantly. Eleanor blinked, stunned, but Damien's expression didn't waver. Mock her again, he said evenly, his voice low but laced with steel, and you'll regret it. For a moment, nobody moved. The tension was suffocating. Then Eleanor smiled sweetly, but her eyes burned with restrained fury. Oh, darling, she said softly, you really think you can keep her in our world? Let's see how long she lasts. That night, Leela stood alone on the penthouse balcony, the cold wind biting at her cheeks as the city lights glittered below. She hugged her arms around herself, her heart heavy, fighting the ache in her chest. She hadn't asked for any of this. She didn't want the money, the fame, the drama. She just wanted her quiet life back, scrubbing floors, earning tips, being invisible. But now, she was Mrs. Damien Knight, whether she wanted it or not. You're thinking about running, Damien's voice came from behind her, deep and unreadable. Leela startled slightly, turning to face him. Can you blame me? He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, the heat of him sharp against the cold night air. You can run if you want, he said quietly, but the moment you step outside, the press will devour you. My family will destroy you. You won't survive. She swallowed hard, anger flashing in her eyes. So I'm trapped. Damien's gaze softened for just a fraction of a second, so subtle she almost thought she imagined it. You're not trapped, he said finally. You're protected. There's a difference. She blinked at him, confused. Protected? From who? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, his jaw tightening as he stared out at the city skyline. Stay close to me, Leela, he said after a pause, his voice quieter now, almost like a warning. You have no idea what kind of enemies you've just inherited. That night, lying awake in the enormous bed she now shared in name only, Leela stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning. She didn't understand Damien Knight. He was cold, calculating, and dangerous, but there were cracks in his armor. Moments where his gaze softened, where his voice lowered, where he seemed almost human. And that terrified her more than anything, because if she wasn't careful, she might start falling for her husband.